just over 6'5", 295 pounds, Jordan Burch brings the absolute athletic profile and physical build that a lot of teams are going to love when it's draft time. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about Jordan Burch out of Oregon. But before we do that, let me let you know that this video is being brought to you by BetUS. So use code in the description, YouTube150, to get your 150% deposit match on your first deposit up to $2,000 and 125% on your next two deposits as your sign-up bonus for your first time signing up with BetUS. And not only can you get in on NFL action like the Super Bowl or draft specials coming up, but also the basketball trade deadline is right around the corner. And as you can see right now, I've got my early bet in on the Warriors because I thought they were going to get Durant. Don't think that's going to happen, but I thought I'd show it off. So again, check out BetUS. A fifth-year senior that is now 23 years old. That's production hasn't been insane as a pass rusher, but it has steadily felt like it's inclined. He's had a lot of snaps under his belt, spent his first 3 seasons with South Carolina before transferring to Oregon to link up with Dan Lanning. And this past season, he was listed with 10 sacks, so his production did take a little bit of a jump, but his hurries were kind of on the same plane over the past 2 seasons. What gets you excited about Jordan Burch isn't the production, it's what it could be in the NFL. We're going to see as we go through here, even with his critical factors, the grades that I gave him, I think across the board, there's real belief for upside. I think as a pass rusher, maybe I'm buying into some of that upside already, but I think there's upside in a couple of these categories that I just have a lower grade because of what I've seen in college, but I think there's something there, and I think my final grade will kind of say it all. So let's get right into it. We'll start off with his first step explosion, and this is right away where I could very much improve at the next level. I don't think it's like an elite first step. I actually gave him an average grade here, but what I do think is there's upside as his pass rush plan improves, and there's more decisiveness getting off the ball, how he wants to attack an offensive lineman, especially the wider he gets, that could potentially improve his timing, because right now there's inconsistency just getting off the ball on time. The wider he is, the further away from the ball he is, versus when he's in a 4-eye technique or he's pushed a little bit closer to the center, he gets a better jump off the ball against interior offensive line when he's closer to the football. So there's that aspect. But then also as a run defender, I think there's inconsistency right now in terms of where his first step goes. It tends to set him back on run plays. And laterally, I don't think he covers fantastic depths. You'll see on like wide zone schemes, even from a 4-eye or a 4 technique, where he's trying to deal with a reach blocker on the backside, offensive tackles. Good offensive tackles are going to have the opportunity to seal those blocks. They're going to cut him off on the backside, and he's not going to be able to deal with those reach blocks. Positive is he tries to stay square to the line of scrimmage, but he doesn't cover enough depth laterally for him to maintain that. It kind of turns into I have to kind of turn and run in these spots, and I think right now that shows up. The positive first step explosion is it does feel like there's real explosion that is created off the first step. There can be explosion that's created immediately into contact. He does cover good ground vertically, upfield, working upfield off the ball, and there's real foot quickness. For a guy at his size, there's real foot quickness in the lower body. I think it shows up in terms of the agility and the body control that he brings, the ability to position very quickly against the run. It opens up his success as kind of a slant gap kind of player. See it on stunts, the crashes, the loops, specifically the crashes from outside to the inside, the effectiveness that can have specifically. So for me, while I have his first step right now at an average grade, I think there's much more upside here. He could be an elite, get off the ball kind of piece, but I think that he can press into the good category. So as of now, I'm going slightly above average, but I don't have him in a good category as of yet. But I will say his ability to close on the ball carrier does stand out, and you see that his ability to track down pursuit with the length that he does carry, that is sometimes a visual representation of what his first step could look like. Now in terms of the play strength, this is the toughest spot for me to grade because I currently have him sitting with a good grade right now, and I feel good about that based on what I've seen, but I think there's a lot more in the tank here, and I love the way that he's built physically. As touched on, he's a really tall defensive lineman that it really helps him in terms of his vision to find a ball carrier, but specifically it's the fact that he's very stout, he's well built, he's stocky in the lower body, and that shows up consistently, and you'll see a lot of flashes of the power that he can create, the power that he can create through his hips specifically, and he feels like there's a lot of strength within his game. The problem is, I think technically speaking, he leaves a lot of that on the table because he doesn't consistently create force from the ground, especially as a pass rusher. A lot of things feel like they're created more so through his upper body, and he doesn't get his lower body as much into it. And even as a run defender, the entry points, the inconsistency there leads to inconsistency to enact some of that play strength that I think that he does have, so that counts into the grade. He does show an ability to create force from the ground as a run defender specifically. It just doesn't show up for me as much as a pass rusher. The transition, we always talk about that conversion of speed to power. I think that's an issue because the speed doesn't really turn on consistently for him unless it's a decision off the ball for a bull rush, and then it pops up more, which is again why if he has more decisiveness and it's a better pass rush plan, I think that specifically will improve and it'll look better. It shows up more as a pass rusher, but he does show ability to convert some power against the run, specifically, say if he's trying to set an edge. He also has that suddenness in the lower body with some of that foot quickness to set early, position himself well. The upside is there, which can also improve his play strength. The inconsistent hands, which we'll talk about, it also leads to double teams pushing him off his spot. His inability at times to sustain a lower pad level, which he shows he's very capable of getting off the ball with low pad level, playing with a wide base, but it shows to be inconsistent through contract, trying to work back over blocks. He tends to kind of rise up as the play goes along, and that also limits some of the play strength that I think he brings to the table. Even as a pass rusher, the inconsistency, I think, to leverage properly into bull rush opportunities leaves so much to be desired in terms of play strength. Though, to me, this is the most clear area in terms of the critical factors where you could put a higher grade just betting on what it could turn into, and I wanted to. I just lift it right now in the good category, but I think this can press up into the very good to a great category for Jordan Burch, and this is one of the reasons that you can buy in. Again, we'll see in my final grade where I'm kind of at with it. Next up would be the pass rush ability, and again, this was a weird one for me because I actually feel like I'm betting a little bit more on what I think he's capable of rather than what he did in college. So I'm actually going to jump with a good grade here as a pass rusher. Look, the production doesn't say that he's a fantastic pass rusher. I think the versatility that he can bring as a pass rusher is what stands out to me here. So a lot of different things. First off, I think he shows some real knee bend when working upfield. The ability to dip and bend the corner was very surprising for a guy to his size. It looked very fluid, looked very natural, looked very coordinated when setting up kind of the dip and bend to turn the arc around the top of the pass rush. That was pretty surprising. That was the thing that surprised me the most, is how natural he looked in those spots. My problem, again, the speed to power conversion is not where I would like it to be. He doesn't play with a ton of shiftiness either. Real agility here in terms of the footwork in the lower body, but I think in terms of being shifty, having a ton of shake at the top of the rush, I think that's just at an average position right now. He tends to lose some momentum when trying to convert speed to power. I don't think he has a great ability to turn on the acceleration suddenly and transition that very well if his initial plan wasn't directly bull rush opportunity. Now, the positive is because he can create some real knee bend, and because he has so much strength in the hips, that he has that ability to create half-man opportunities, create wins through half-man opportunities, and I always feel like that if you can do that, if you can collapse the pocket through half-man, get the outside shoulder of an offensive tackle, that's something that's very translatable and consistent to the next level, and I think he carries that aspect within his game. Maybe not the best, but I think he does carry that aspect within his game. Still a suddenness into contact, and that helps him translate some power, and also specifically just get guys off balance for entry points. Again, if he's trying to work the corner, offensive tackle sets a little wide, can he transition into, okay, try to knock back here, let's try to create some walk back? Yes, he can do that. He can transition, and he transitions a lot of power through the hips as of now, and he carries some real suddenness again in the lower body to transition that speed to power potentially there. Hip strike, the strength in the lower body that he does have, allows him some effectiveness to create power when he is turning the corner as a pass rusher, which really opens up to, again, half-man opportunities, because typically that's through how the offensive tackle sets. You get that opportunity opened up, and then he can try to work through that. And with some of the bend that he carries along the edge as well, if it's not cleanly picked up on, he can turn the corner a little bit as well in an offensive tackle, which again surprised me based on his build. But the speed conversion to me is more on the average plane, but I do think that there is an ability, and it shows flashes of his ability to actually create leverage into contact, that he has a real ability to work back under pads, and this can be an immediate decision off the ball. This is a bull rush opportunity for me, or it can be throughout the rep. His ability to transition from outside back inside or inside back outside while also working underneath an offensive lineman's pads really will help him on stunts and games inside. I don't think he's been fantastic there, but I think you see the upside, and I think that ability to constantly work under an offensive lineman's pads at 6'5" with the build that he carries is a pretty special quality, and I think he absolutely has that to live under the pads of an offensive line because of some of the bend that he does play with in the lower body. Two is he doesn't consistently get skinny. I don't think he plays with a ton of slipperiness either as a pass rusher specifically. He is a little bit tighter. As much as he can bend, he does play a little bit tighter, which leads to some issues of not being able to slip gaps or have as much slither as maybe you would expect as a pass rusher for the guy with the kind of bend that he has. He can laterally, over gaps, for example, it gets a little bit wider, so even in some of those stun opportunities, if it's not clean through, it turns into getting a lot of contact, and then at that point, again, that's where the upside of half-man opportunities is there, but the lack of consistency and speed to power transition is not there, so it starts to pull back on some of the effectiveness when he's working from outside to inside and the guard settled himself down to actually win in those spots. That's where he'll have to open up more of the ability to win as a finesse pass rusher, which again, the bend is there, I think the agility is there, the body control, as we'll touch on, I think is above average as of now, so I think that's a real upside point of his game, and I like how he uses his hands, though they're just not as consistent or as efficient as you would hope to open it up as consistently as you would like, and I think that the coordination between hands hands and footwork can be a little bit all over the place, which again comes back to the pass rush plan and can limit some of the ability to win as more of a finesse pass rusher. Lacks a little bit of the juice to turn the corner, which is a little bit concerning, where even when the opportunity may present itself to bend the edge, he's not the bendiest edge rusher anyway, so he's still going to need a little bit of separation. And because of, I think, some of the lack of juice to turn the corner and some of the real twitch in his game, offensive tackles do have a real opportunity to recover against him as a pass protector specifically. He doesn't bring a ton of slipperiness to completely dip and bend the edge and slide around offensive linemen if they're in a relatively good spot. So lacking some of that juice, I think, also pulls back again from that speed to power conversion that he could potentially create. His length really well. I think there's a nice awareness to his game, a good football intelligence. I think he's a very nice space player, but specifically his ability to use his length, kind of disrupt passing lanes. He plays with fantastic vision for the ball. I think that's one of the best aspects, run defender and as a pass rusher. He plays with very good vision. He utilizes height really well to see over blocks and be able to continue to work through contact and find where the ball is. And as a pass rusher, you'll see that where he can jump into passing lanes that are completely off the script, but find a quarterback through those passing lanes because of his ability to read through the pocket. Because of some of the lack to get skinny, I think his footwork tends to get a little bit tight and it's not as fluid. Splitting gaps, it's not as much depth created. It gets a little bit tight and it feels like his pass rush really tends to stall at that point because there's a little bit of tightness. You get in between guards, for example, and everything kind of becomes super condensed and the creases are very small. I think his tightness can be a little bit of an issue. It's a little bit stiff and there's not that kind of looseness to really slip through gaps. And because the speed to power conversion isn't fantastic as of now, and I don't think he constantly creates force from the ground, I think things tend to stall a little bit more between the inside than the outside, which is why, weirdly enough, I think he showed much more consistency as a rusher on the edge. He has the body type of put him in the interior, he's got the length for it, and his get off is much better, but the two things haven't really tied together for him being elite, I think, in either category right now, which is why as a pass rusher, if you had a lower grade, I understand it, but I'm betting on what I think I can turn into because of the amount of traits that I think that he brings. I think he carries real ankle flexion. I think he carries real coordination as a pass rusher, which points to, I think, the fact that he has good body control. I think the flexion in his torso is effective as well. I currently have a good grade on him as a pass rusher. It's banking a little bit on what I think it's going to turn into. I don't think day one that he'd be a good pass rusher in the NFL. I think it would take some time, but I think eventually you can get there and potentially more, but I think that could be a little bit more of the ceiling where he can get as a pass rusher. I think the play strength has more upside than what I even graded him with, and I think the first step explosion also has some more upside, but I think the pass rush is something he's going to have to continue to work towards. His lower body bend and explosiveness is very noticeable, but then there's also the contact balance, which is very helpful as a pass rusher to kind of just pinball off of guys and continue his pass rush plan his upside. In terms of hand usage, this is where I was a little bit mixed because there's things that I really liked about his hand usage and there's things I definitely did not like about his hand usage, but again, the footwork needs to tie, and I think for him, the footwork doesn't always tie to a great spot, not because he can't or he's not coordinated, just because I don't think he always has a great plan as a pass rusher, and again, his entries are very inconsistent as a run defender. Hand usage, one area which I didn't love is I think there's real inconsistency in terms of an ability to lock out, set down an edge, lock out, and then also be able to work over blocks. I think there's inconsistency right now. I think one big problem is, and you'll especially see it against like tight ends because they get on him quicker, is that his base is not where you want it to be consistently, so then at that point he gets pushed off a spot, and the other issue to that is he doesn't, again, create a lot of great force consistently, I think, through the ground, so he becomes much more of an upper body type of player that tries to create power everything from the upper body. I think the problem that becomes is there's just not sustainability, especially at the next level, where guys that are smaller than him make him look like he's not as powerful as he truly is, which he'll flash at times, and because of that, there's not a ton of knockback at the point of attack, so he doesn't create that separation that you want to see. So guys tend to stay latched with him way too darn long, and there's not that immediate disengagement and separation. We looked at Kyle Kennard, he does that at a really high level, that ability to separate, create a lot of space, even though he's not as, I would say, as strong as this player, he shows that a lot better than what you see here, and Burch doesn't have the longest arms either, seemingly, even with a guy that's just over 6'5", that doesn't help him either, so he really needs to find a way to convert much more energy into that first point of attack to create real knockback, to create some distance between him and a blocker. Again, I think he does tend to be inconsistent in terms of his first step timing, the wider he is, so even against tight ends, you'll see guys like that potentially jump into spots where they're on top of it before he even gets to that spot, especially when you're talking about these wide zone schemes that he's got to continuously work laterally. That first step, the inconsistency, but also the ground covered, again, opens opportunities for poor entry angles, and then he gets himself in a spot where he just doesn't play with any leverage, and that happens too often. It's tough. He has enough athleticism laterally to make it work. He carries, I think, plus agility. The problem is I just don't think he gets consistent leverage because of the way that he enters back into contact. He typically plays with really nice wide base. He plays with a much better pad level for the most part than what you would expect for a guy at his height, and you tie those two things together with his ability to position very quickly, and as long as he's in the right spot, he can get on guys in a hurry, especially the closer to the ball that he is, that he can set himself up for a lot of success and to be a big disruptor against the run specifically. Plus, what he ties in well is he plays with great discipline out in space. space. I think he's a nice space player. I think his ability to read the mesh point, be very patient at the mesh point. He shows a legitimate closing burst out in space to kind of track down ball carriers that are trying to hit the sideline. But there's very, very consistent discipline as a pass rusher to find the ball and as a run defender to settle himself down and not overplay things. The discipline plays a lot into what he can be as a run defender specifically, especially when he gets unblocked. And then you'll see that out in space where he nearly had an interception because of the body control that he's able to play with. And again, the discipline to read the back out of the backfield, swing over with it, recognize it, nearly come up with a pick. He has more space ability, again, than maybe what you'd expect based on his build. He has the athleticism to kind of tap into there, which really surprised me. I wouldn't want him dropping the coverage 20 times a game, but he's very capable of doing it, which opens up so much position flexibility. You can stand him up on the line of scrimmage. You can put his hand in the dirt. He can be fluid off the ball. There's a little delay, but he can be very fluid off the ball, and you can put him on the interior, especially on pass down. There's a lot of flexibility in just terms of alignment. His hands are inconsistent on his bull rush attempts. They tend to be inconsistent in terms of placement, again, tied with footwork. There's also the aspect that his hands tend to rise and they get very high on pads. They get up on shoulders, and at that point, he just loses all kind of control over a rep when that does happen. The positive is, I think that he has a very accurate club move that skips really well together with his footwork. The timing, I don't think, is always great based on how the tackle sets, but it really does flow together well. He also has a push-pull strength that he can get to, again, back to the hips, and the ability to get his feet back on the ground with foot quickness there. He has an ability to create those push-pull opportunities and find success, and his hands do work to kind of string things together, okay? I don't think it's always the most efficient, but he does work to kind of work things together. So just because he gets latched early doesn't mean the rep's going to stall. He's going to work to get his hands free. He's going to work to get himself free. You get two-handed punches. You get two-handed chop down moves. You get some variety. We've seen spin upside. He has real variety, and he has the real strength to continue working, and I think he has a very good motor at this point as a run defender and as a pass rusher. Fluid swim counter that he can also get to after being latched, which again opens up upside to just continue working. That may be more of his game early as a pass rusher. Is he's that effort rusher. He's the guy that continues working through reps, that maybe it's not instant wins as often as you would hope for. However, he's going to make plays just on effort alone early as other things are developing, and then you need that run defense to really step up immediately for him, be impactful early, because he has all the traits for it. We just need to dial in some consistency and where you're going to be at on the play, and as long as we're consistent there, you play with the discipline and the traits to be a very nice run defender. The shed ability, which again to me is just slightly above average here. I wanted to go higher, but I definitely could not. Working over the flow of zone runs, I think as of now is a problem. Caught on the backside too often. I think his vision is fantastic, which opens upside to just make plays, and you see it as a tackler as well. He's a very good tackler. I think his length plays into that. The way that he sells out, the closing burst, I think that he could be an absolute finisher. Also does have a conscious effort to really play square to the line of scrimmage, and while maybe it could get him in trouble because he can't move that quick laterally, he does have the agility, and he trusts his footwork to stay square to the line of scrimmage. It's not super often that you'll find him get his body completely turned unless he's trying to maybe slip a gap upfield and he's unable to do that. I think he plays with an explosive change of direction through contact, which allows him to continue to work as a guy that can shed. Again, it doesn't stall out immediately for him just because he gets latched early. He's strong in that lower body, which is really important to create push-pull opportunities, to create rip-through opportunities, to kind of just push guys off of him as the rep continues to work through and create leverage, but the base is inconsistent. I mean, there's way too many times you'll just see him falling down onto one knee where it doesn't even feel necessary, but he's sliding down to one knee, he loses base from out from underneath him completely, and then again, he just doesn't have any leverage, and he's creating no power through the ground. He's not helping himself as a whole and really tapping into what I think is really there. So I think there's going to be development that needs to happen, but to me, he's a very good athlete in the lower body. I mean, you'll see it. He can be on the ground and just pop up in an instant. He doesn't play like he's 295 pounds. There's real athleticism there. He does play with the right discipline. So for me overall, this is a player that I think in terms of critical factors has a lot more upside than what his grades are right now. I think specifically in terms of play strength, I think the pass rush is a work in progress. It's probably a little bit closer to average as of now, but I put him in the good category because I buy into there's a lot of flexibility. He's not just a guy that can win one way. I think there's a lot of ways that he can win. I think there's a lot of spots that he can win at. In terms of first step explosion, I don't know how high this one actually can top into. I'm slightly above average. I think it could get to the good category potentially depending on the spot that he's in, but right now I don't think that one has the highest ceiling. However, his shed ability, his hand usage, those things can absolutely improve, especially his ability to shed blocks more consistently, his ability to improve as a run defender, consistency, but what he does bring is some of the unnatural traits for a guy his size. Good body control, I think he brings above average agility, and he's a finisher against the run that plays with a really hot motor, nice discipline, and I think, again, plus football intelligence, specifically with his ability to find the ball. This player has a ton of upside as a pass rusher with real strength and flexibility in his game. The flexibility is the other surprise surprise going back to body control. There's a lot of flexion to his game. He's a little bit stiff trying to corner and trying to get through tight spaces, but he does have a lot of flexibility to drop his weight, drop his pad level, and that's massive because he's not standing up straight trying to deal with the run. So I think there's a lot in here. I just don't think it's fully been tapped into yet in a lot of different areas, but I guess that's what the draft's all about. That's why you got to develop guys. It may take some time. I could see this taking a minute for Jordan Burch to really come onto the scene. I don't think it's a finished product by any means, but I think that if you're looking at it from the perspective of not being a round 1 pick, but if we picked him up, say, in day 2 potentially, I don't know if he can get to day 3. I think it's on the table that he could get early day 3, but if we got him in that area, then I think that maybe by year 2, we get to a spot where we feel great about what he can bring, and he could potentially become a 3-down starter. Right now, my grade's probably a little bit higher than you would expect. I'm giving him a 6.3, and I'm going to start putting these graphics to show where my updated grades are as we continue to work through players. So with that being said, shout out to BetUS, use code YouTube150. Appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.